Good morning. I'm going to whisper. It feels like a Sunday, doesn't it? Are we all post-Chris Moyles? Was anyone at Chris Moyles last night? Jumping up and down? Yeah. I was in the silent disco, fell over again. Thankfully, it was on sand. Welcome to the Campervan Campout Hub. We're going to have a very gentle start this morning, and we've got a fantastic guest for you. But I wonder, would you mind just coming forward a little bit so we make Lucy feel a little bit more welcome? Would that be okay? People naturally gravitate to the back of the room. I don't know why. Why do we do it? We just have electric chairs that slide forward. So you come in, sit at the back, and you end up at the front. That's great. So do make yourselves at home. Delighted to have absolutely Lucy here with us today. Lucy's been travelling around. I'm not going to spoil her story because she's going to share it. She's been travelling on her own for 10 years, largely because she doesn't have any friends. Is that true? Anyway, would you give a warm welcome, please, to absolutely Lucy. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a great weekend. As Matt said, I have been travelling on my own for 10 years now. I've travelled to almost 50 countries. I'm going to hit my 50th this year, and I'm very excited. I'm going to make that a special one. But I haven't always been travelling by myself on all of those trips. I've mixed up those trips, travelling with a partner, with friends, meeting people along the way. And I just wanted to talk a bit more about solo travel, really, and how you can integrate that into your life. Some people might be first-time solo travellers. You might be somebody who's a bit more experienced but wants to get a bit of inspiration for a next trip. But I think it's just one of those topics that there's a lot of people have questions about solo travel, especially if they're looking to start, particularly around maybe safety, around getting a bit confidence about being able to take that first step. So I'm going to cover a few of these topics today. I hope I can answer some of those questions you might have. But yeah, I just wanted to start off just talking a bit about my travel experience. So I actually, 10 years ago, I basically reached a point where I was sick of my job. I was sick of my boyfriend at the time, and I decided to take a step that it felt like a really huge one for me at the time. So I quit that job, I quit that boyfriend, and I decided to go off and travel the world. I had always dreamed of going off traveling, and for me, I sort of finished uni, and then I found a job, and it just didn't feel like the right time. I was really kind of comfortable in my life at home, and it just felt like it was never going to be the right time, and then everything built up, and I just thought, you know what, it's now or never. If I don't go, I might never get the chance to go again. So I went off, traveled the world. I had a lot of comments before I first went away that it might not be safe. People were worried about me. People didn't want me to go alone. The reason I actually went alone was because I'd actually asked one of my best friends from uni to come with me. We'd always talked about going together and going on a big adventure, but she had actually just started a new job. She'd just got into a new relationship. It wasn't the right time for her. So for me, I basically just thought, well, I could go by myself, and it could be scary, and it could be a big risk, but I could also just not go. And for me, that wasn't an option, and that was a lot scarier, the thought of missing out on the opportunity to see these amazing places and do these amazing things. So I went by myself, and it turns out it wasn't as big and scary as everybody else had been telling me. It wasn't terrifying. That first bit where I had to get on the plane by myself, that was a bit scary. I did have a few glasses of red wine just to calm my nerves. But after that, it was just these little steps, just kept going forwards and just taking it one day at a time, rather than always thinking, oh my God, I'm doing this really big, scary thing. So I went off traveling. I went to Southeast Asia. I went backpacking around Australia. I went all over by myself, made some amazing friends, and carried on traveling, basically. And I've kind of been traveling ever since. And now I don't travel as much long term, but back then I was traveling sometimes for years at a time, using working holiday visas and so on. Now I tend to take shorter trips and base myself a bit more in the UK. But yeah, during the pandemic, I was actually away traveling in Central America by myself. I took a dream trip over there. But then obviously the pandemic grounded everybody, so I had to take a very, very stressful journey to get back to the UK, which is actually what prompted me to buy my campervan. I had spent many years traveling around road tripping in places like Australia, around Europe in other vans, and even living out of the back of cars at points, just to kind of have that camping wild experience. And it was time I finally invested in a van of my own. So I've brought my van here this weekend. She's called Fortuna, named after the goddess of luck. But yeah, so I have always loved road tripping and camper vans and exploring that way. I feel like it gives you so much freedom. So I was really excited to have a van of my own and to be able to just bring that travel experience back to the UK a little bit. So I just wanted to kick off today just with a few stats because I love a number. And I think one of the things that holds a lot of people back from solo travel and taking those first steps, a lot of the time it's just confidence. People worry that they might not be able to do it by themselves. I don't think, to be honest, women are given the impression that we're sometimes as capable as we realise. And 85% of women are actually solo travellers. Now, this stat actually really, really blew me away because I had no idea that the number of solo female travellers was that high. But I think it's really incredible to think that actually there are so many women out there who are doing solo travel already. They're showing that it's possible and that it's accessible and that it's an actual realistic opportunity for you to go out there and do. So I think if you are thinking about taking a solo trip, but you're feeling a little bit like, I don't know if I should do this, I don't know if I'm going to be safe, I don't know if is it silly for me to take a trip by myself, then I think just remember that there are actually a lot of women out there who are already doing this. It's not a big deal, but it just means that if they're doing it, surely you can too. I also thought it was an interesting number that actually 80% of travel decisions are made by women. So if you're actually, planning trips for maybe you and your partner, your husband, your friends, you're actually already essentially making a lot of the decisions you would need to make as a solo traveler. And I think we forget that sometimes. I know for me, I'm a big trip planner. So even if I'm not traveling by myself, I'm probably doing a lot of the planning and organizing. And it's just one of those things we forget. Actually, a lot of what goes into making a trip happen is the preparation, is the booking the trip, is the booking the buses or the coaches or the parking spots or the planes or whatever it might be. You are the person who is doing a lot of that already, so there's no reason that you're not capable of doing it for yourself. It's not any different. So one of the questions, no matter where I go, this is the question I get asked the most. And I think it's really difficult to talk about solo travel without talking about the media's portrayal of solo travel. I actually picked out these 2 Forbes articles, and there's thousands of examples of this. But these 2 articles, I don't know if you can read that, but the first one is 33 best tips and tricks for solo female travel and the 20 most dangerous places for women travelers. These articles were both written by the same woman and not even written that much of a distance apart. Like they were written within the same time frame. And I just think it's so interesting the way that solo travel is portrayed as this really big, dangerous thing. But they're also happy to jump on the SEO of this and try and get the articles to perform as well as possible by suggesting tips to us. So I just think there's always that conflict in the way that travel is portrayed to women. But as you've seen from the numbers speak for themselves. 85% of women are solo traveling. And we're getting out there, we're exploring the world. So as much as they're saying that it's really, really dangerous for us, we are doing it. I'm living proof of that, and I've been doing it for 10 years, and I'm still here. So I just think when you are thinking about solo travel, if you're nervous to take a first trip, just remember that people are always going to tell you it's dangerous. I remember when I booked a solo trip to Mexico, I was told by somebody who was very, very well traveled that I was probably going to get shot. So I think, there will always be these people who are, and I mean, that was also somebody who's never been to Mexico. There will always be people who tell you it's too dangerous, that it's not safe. Please do come in, take a seat. There will always be people who tell you that you can't do it, or that there's going to be dodgy people following you around, or, you know. And I think it's always important to acknowledge the fact that as women, we move through this world differently to men. We do. As a mixed race woman, I move through this world differently to some of you guys. You know, you are going to have a different experience. There are different challenges that are faced by women when we travel. There are different considerations. But I think for me, what really helped was actually just reframing a lot of that and not telling myself, it's not too, like, I don't believe there's a single country in the world that is too dangerous for me to travel solo. But there are some that are going to be a lot more challenging than others. And I think a lot of that comes back to what preparation can I do to alleviate those challenges? Are there certain things I can do before I've even left the country to actually think ahead and plan and organize things in a way that are going to help me travel and help me to avoid any of those potential problems that I might face? So I think, like, don't ever think that you can't do something, but I just think take a look at it in a bigger picture way and just think, right, if I'm going to travel there, how can I anticipate what could go wrong? And I just think the planning and preparation parts of travel, as much I loved spontaneous travel, but I think all those bits you can do beforehand just to organize yourself really help you feel more confident when you arrive. Even just as simple as like looking up where you're going to be staying, maybe booking a first night of accommodation somewhere, or knowing where you're going to be parking your van up for the night. And just thinking ahead, okay, well, when I arrive, where do I need to go? Am I going to need to walk somewhere by myself? Am I going to know where I'm going? Am I going to have maps on my phone or something like that I can access? That kind of thing. So, carrying on a little bit more about the solo travel tips, and I think one of my absolute favorite tips is to always try and plan to arrive in a new place in the light. And I think it's something people do forget when they're trying to book their travel, or maybe they're flying in on an overnight flight or something and they're landing somewhere in the dark, or maybe they're driving in the dark and then they're arriving at a park up for the night and it's dark and it's shadowy and it's just uncomfortable and a little bit, it just puts you on edge instantly. And I think for me, when I've been doing solo trips in my van, this has been a real big one for me, is just always making sure that if I'm going to a park up, I'm a big fan of free park ups. I love Park for Night. I just think it's brilliant. I traveled all the way around Wales by myself and loved like parking up and just finding these amazing free spots. But for me, arriving at any of those in the dark just made me feel instantly on edge, made me feel nervous, and it just made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And sometimes it would be perfectly nice place, but it would just make you feel a little bit, ooh. But I think if you're arriving in the daytime, you get a chance to set yourself up. You've got a chance to just get the lay of the land, figure out if there's toilets or if there's water or anything like that you need to do with your van. Then you've got somewhere you can feel comfortable and just kind of get set up. And I think it's the same if you're traveling, like if you're going abroad somewhere as well. That was always a thing when I was backpacking or if I'm traveling by myself. I just think, I'm going to arrive somewhere in the daytime. I know when I've parked, like if I've come off an overnight bus or something like that, and I've arrived somewhere and it's like the early hours of the morning, or it's like just a bit dark and I'm getting swamped by tuk-tuk drivers or somebody else, and I'm just a bit like overwhelmed and I'm exhausted, and I just think, that is not a situation where things are going to go well. So I just say if you can organize your trips so that you are going to be arriving somewhere in a way that you're instantly going to be able to feel comfortable, you're going to know where you're going, you're going to be really, really confident about what you've got to do, whether you've got to go get yourself a SIM card or whether you need to go get yourself a hotel or a hostel or whatever, you're going to feel like you know what you're doing and you know where you're going. Things like that make a massive, massive difference for you. And I think there's a lot of people I know who have gone places, and I know I've had that before, where I've rocked up somewhere and maybe something a little bit dodgy has happened, or I've felt like it could have. And I think that can sometimes really shadow how your opinion of a place. I know for me, I had sort of a role of not so great travel experiences when I was in Cambodia, and for me it was just bad luck, bad organization on my part. It was a lot of little things that happened, and I think it really shadowed how I felt about that place as a country. It really, really changed my view, and it prevented me from being able to enjoy some of the better parts of the trip as well. So I think from that, I took a lot of learnings and just thought, right, I'm going to start shifting how I actually organize my trips so that I know when I arrive, I'm going to feel confident to actually actually move around in that space and to meet people and so on. I know that one of the bigger questions I get asked around is meeting people when you're traveling solo and loneliness. And I think some of these solo travel tips and the advice that I give around safety really feed into that. Personally, I find as a solo traveler, it's really, really important for you to go out and to actually be meeting other people. I think sometimes there's this kind of idea that if I'm going to be traveling solo, I'm never going to make any friends. I'm never going to get to know anybody. I'm going to be lonely all the time. But actually, that's not the case. If anything, I've had to fight for time alone sometimes when I've been traveling solo, because I think as a solo traveler, it really, really opens people up to wanting to get to know you. If I'm traveling with my partner, for instance, I don't find I end up talking to as many new people because you're busy having that one-on-one time with the person you're traveling with. But when you're traveling by yourself, I'm having conversations with absolutely everybody. And I think if you're traveling by yourself and feeling a little bit nervous about being alone, that's a really, really great way to make those connections with people, because it actually makes you feel safer. I know when I've parked up places in my campervan, and there might be a few people dotted around the park up or the campsite, just having a conversation with the people around you makes you feel instantly a bit more comfortable. It can be as simple as just going and saying hi and introducing yourself, but I think it also then makes people aware of you. And I find personally as a solo traveler that a lot of people are very, very keen to either get to know me, but also to look out for me, which I think is something that is forgotten sometimes, is that actually people just really want to help you a lot of the time. Yeah, there's some bad eggs out there, but that's the case anywhere. But I think if you're ever feeling a bit nervous about being on your own, chatting to people around you makes them aware of you, and it means they're more likely to be looking out for you. So if anything does go wrong or you're being approached by someone who's a bit dodgy, then they're probably going to come over and help, maybe intervene or something like that, or invite you out somewhere. So I think if you're traveling by yourself in your van, definitely go and have a chat. I know some of my friends here, they were saying that they'd actually gone and picked somebody up in a car park and brought them to this festival because they did just enjoyed getting to know them and making them feel really, really welcome. So, but it's the same if you're taking a solo trip abroad as well. I know it's always been my thing that I'll go and try and make friends in the hostel or in the hotel, or you would just chat to people, chat to the staff, chat to the people working on the bar. Always if you're feeling like you want to meet other people, it's worth trying to look at booking group trips and things like that. You're still a solo traveler, but it's just a great way to meet like-minded people. So there's lots of opportunities, and it also gives you a chance to, if you want to book a day activity or something like that, gives you a chance to book and meet people who are very, very like-minded into the same hobbies you are. So it might be as simple as doing a walking tour somewhere, but I know I've gone on a walking tour and then met people who I've ended up on a bar crawl with. So I think it's just, there's lots of different ways to do it, and it could be, you go on a different trip just to break up your solo travel, just so you get to meet people and have conversations. But it's, just a really, really good way just to feel like you're part of something still and get that sense of community, because that doesn't disappear just because you're traveling by yourself. It just means that you look for it in different ways, and you might have to be more proactive about seeking out that connection with people. But I do think it's something that is a big part of solo travel for me, is making those connections with strangers, because that's the sort of thing that it wasn't something that when I first started solo traveling I thought of when I sort of associated with solo travel, but it has become a real reason for me wanting to do it now, because I think the community you get from doing that, you make friendships in a deeper way. I think consider myself very lucky to have friends all over the world, and there are some people that I've really connected with, and I'm thinking when I've traveled into new places and I've met more of the locals and connected with them around their businesses or their families and been invited into their homes, and I'm that's the sort of thing that doesn't happen when I travel with other people. So I think it's really, really valuable, and it gives you a different way to move in this world. So, talking about planning solo adventures in 2024, I think one of the things that I'm really, really keen to inspire is the fact that you don't have to be a long-term backpacker taking a big world trip to be a solo traveler. You don't have to be a full-time solo van lifer to be a solo traveler. There's so many ways to integrate solo travel into your life. I have a boyfriend. I travel with him. I travel with my friends. I also travel solo. There's so many different ways to do it. So you could be married and think, you know what, I just want to go away and take a trip and build my confidence in solo travel. There's so many different ways to do it, and I think that's really, really important, is that any of us could go and travel solo. We could all plan a little trip, and it doesn't have to be that you're going to the other side of the world. It can be you're going and taking a little day trip somewhere different by yourself. It could be that you take the van or campervan or motorhome, whatever you might have, and you plan like a bit of a weekend getaway. It could be, there's so many different ways that you can integrate that, and I think it's really, really valuable for all of us to take that time on our own and to feel confident to do it, because there are so many benefits from planning a solo getaway. I think actually it's also about having that time, just the space, and giving that to yourself to actually be able to grow, to think, to experience new things, and to challenge yourself as well, because I do think there's a lot of things that you face when you're solo traveling. It's not necessarily easy all the time. There are a lot of things that you struggle with at times, and it might be, if you're not used to being on your own and being alone, that can be a challenge in itself. But that's also how you grow from that, and how you actually end up developing, enjoying your own company, enjoying your own time. So I think it's really, really valuable for you to also be able to think, it's not just I'm going to go to this place by myself and go and have a little getaway, but it's also an opportunity for you to really enjoy your own company, to do something just for you. Because I think that's one of those things that we often don't do. We don't take that time for ourselves. We don't actually book something or plan something because we just want to take time alone and to enjoy that. I think a lot of the time it's like we need to go do something. We need to go and experience something. And it's not always about that. I think sometimes it's also just about, it can just be about the journey. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but like, if I'm going on a road trip in my van, it's not just about going to a destination. It's about the whole experience. It's about sitting in the car by myself and just like driving somewhere and singing at the top of my lungs to my favorite music, and having that experience of pulling in somewhere and having to do all those things with my van myself. And yeah, I think it's just, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of different aspects about taking that solo trip. So I think it's just important to just enjoy those. So that's it from me.